I proudly ran my hand over the glossy midnight blue hood of my brand new Ford F-150. 6 years of saving every penny while working construction had finally paid off. My brother Jake had always been the golden child who got away with everything. Our parents constantly took his side despite his history of irresponsibility. When Jake asked to borrow my truck for an important opportunity, I hesitated but eventually agreed. Before we continue this story about family betrayal and standing up for yourself, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to deal with a golden child sibling. My name is Ray, and at 32 years old I had finally achieved something I could be genuinely proud of. Growing up in Seattle with my brother Jake had always been a challenge. Since I was 16, I had been working construction jobs, eventually putting myself through trade school, while Jake got the benefit of our parents saving for his college education. For 6 long years, I saved every dollar possible, refusing vacations and living in a tiny apartment with barely any furniture. That truck represented more than transportation to me. It was a symbol of my independence and years of hard work. The midnight blue F-150 Platinum was everything I had dreamed about. Leather interior that smelled like success. A premium sound system that made every drive feel like a concert, and enough power under the hood to haul whatever I needed for work. Every detail from the customized rims to the extended cab had been carefully chosen. This was not just a truck. This was my reward to myself for years of sacrifice. The golden child dynamic with Jake had been established early in our lives. He had dropped out of college 3 separate times, with our parents happily paying the tuition each time he decided to find himself again. His employment history was a series of jobs lasting weeks before he either quit because the environment was toxic or got fired for showing up late. Our parents constantly made excuses for his behavior, claiming he was sensitive and creative and needed more time to figure things out. Meanwhile, I had always been expected to be the responsible one since childhood. Just last month, we had a family gathering where our parents spent 20 minutes bragging about Jake's potential and his new business opportunity that they had loaned him $5,000 to explore. My recent promotion to site supervisor barely received a nod of acknowledgement. That pattern had been consistent throughout our lives. Jake was the star even when he was failing, and I was the reliable backup character in the family story. Despite everything, I still hoped that purchasing my truck would finally earn my parents some respect. I invited the family over specifically to see it, thinking that this tangible evidence of my success might change the dynamic. Their reaction was lukewarm at best. Mom glanced at it and said, "Well, it is certainly big. Seems like a lot of money for something that will just get dirty at work sites." Dad walked around it once, briefly complimented the engine, then spent the rest of the visit talking to Jake about his latest venture. Jake himself could barely conceal his jealousy beneath his fake congratulations, making comments about compensating for something when he thought I could not hear. Still, there had been that brief moment when Dad had nodded appreciatively at the engine specs. That small acknowledgement had given me hope that things could change, that they might finally see me as successful in my own right. The fateful request came during our regular Sunday dinner at my parents' house. Jake announced he had a job interview with a prestigious construction management firm the next day. The timing seemed perfect since his car was conveniently having transmission problems. "That is great news about the interview," Mom said, turning to me with that look I knew all too well. "Ray, Jake could really use your truck tomorrow. This interview could change his life." I felt my stomach tighten. "I need my truck for work. I have to visit 3 different sites tomorrow." Dad jumped in immediately. "You could take a day off, right? Or carpool with someone. Family helps family, Ray." "That is what we have always taught you boys." "I just bought it last week," I protested. "I am still breaking it in." Jake put on his most sincere expression. "I promise I will take perfect care of it, big brother. This job could be my big break. You know how much this means to me." The pressure from all 3 of them was intense. Mom started talking about how I had always been selfish with my things, even as a child. Dad mentioned how much they had sacrificed for both of us growing up, implying I owed them this favor. Jake just kept looking disappointed and hurt, like I was deliberately trying to sabotage his future. After 20 minutes of this, I finally relented but set clear conditions. You need to have it back by 6 p.m. sharp. No smoking in it. Return it with a full tank of gas. And absolutely no one else drives it. Jake practically bounced with enthusiasm. You will not regret this. I will treat it better than my own car. Thank you so much. I promise it will be back by 6 clean full tank, no problem at all. The next day, 6 o'clock came and went with no sign of Jake or my truck. My text went unanswered until after 8 when I finally received a brief response. Interview running late. Might need truck overnight. Will explain tomorrow. Thanks, bro. My anxiety quickly turned to anger. I called my parents thinking they might know something more. You need to relax, Mom told me. Jake is probably just celebrating getting the job. Let him enjoy his success. Something felt off about the whole situation. On a hunch, I checked social media and felt my blood pressure spike when I saw Jake had been tagged in photos at Pacific Beach. He was clearly at some party, not a job interview. There were several pictures of him with a red cup in hand, looking anything but professional. The timestamp showed the photos had been posted over 4 hours ago. The knot in my stomach tightened as realization dawned. There had never been any interview. My heart raced as I pulled up the truck GPS tracking app on my phone. The little blue dot showed my F-150 was indeed at Pacific Beach, about 30 miles from where it should have been if Jake had actually gone to an interview. I debated whether to confront him or follow my parents' advice to let it go. After all, it was just one night, right? But something in my gut told me this was different. This was not a borrowed shirt or a few dollars from my wallet. This was my $42,000 investment, the fruit of 6 years of sacrifice. I called an Uber and headed toward the beach location, my heart pounding harder with each mile. The 20-minute ride felt like hours as scenarios played through my mind. Maybe Jake really did have an interview and was just celebrating afterward. Maybe he had been careful with my truck and would apologize for the misunderstanding. Maybe I was overreacting. Those hopes were shattered the moment the Uber pulled up to the beach parking lot. The sound of screeching tires reached my ears before I even saw my truck. My beautiful F-150 was doing donuts in the parking lot, kicking up dust and gravel while a group of people cheered. Behind the wheel was Jake, one hand steering wildly while the other held what looked like a beer can. The truck fishtailed dangerously close to parked cars, narrowly missing a collision by inches. I jumped out of the Uber and ran toward the commotion, waving my arms frantically. Jake, stop. What the hell are you doing? The truck skidded to a halt, and Jake stumbled out, clearly intoxicated. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements uncoordinated. Ray, he slurred. Come join the party, bro. I pushed past him to inspect my truck. Beer cans filled both cup holders. The pristine leather seats I had been so careful with were now stained with spilled alcohol and what looked like nacho cheese. The new car smell had been replaced by cigarettes and beer. You promised to take care of it, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You lied about the interview. You have been drinking and driving my truck. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Or how much trouble you could be in? Jake's friends, a group of guys I had never seen before, gathered around us. One of them laughed. Dude, relax. It is just a truck. Yeah, Jake said, throwing his arm around my shoulder. Relax. I am just having some fun. I will clean it up tomorrow. Give me the keys, I demanded, holding out my hand. Now. I am driving it home. Jake's expression changed, a flash of the sullen defiance I had seen throughout our childhood. No way, man. We are not done here. I told the guys we could head to Anthony's party next. His friends formed a loose circle around us, their body language suddenly threatening. There were 5 of them all, Jake's size or larger, and their expressions made it clear they were not going to let me leave with the truck. I was outnumbered, and frankly scared of what might happen if I pushed harder. I will bring it back tomorrow, Jake said, his tone making it clear the discussion was over. In perfect condition. Scout's honor. He gave a mocking salute. I had no choice but to call another Uber. The humiliating ride home was made worse by the driver's obvious curiosity about my distress. I spent a sleepless night wondering what condition my truck would be in when Jake finally returned it, and whether I had made a terrible mistake trusting him at all. Jake showed up at my apartment the next afternoon, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. "Here you go, all safe and sound," he said, tossing my keys onto the kitchen counter. I immediately went outside to inspect the truck, and my heart sank. A deep scratch ran along the entire passenger side, as if Jake had sideswiped something. The rear bumper had a significant dent. Inside cigarette burns marred the leather seats I had been so proud of. A strange chemical smell lingered in the cab. Most concerning several dashboard warning lights were illuminated that had not been on before. "What happened to the side of my truck?" I demanded when I returned inside. Jake barely looked up from his phone. "That little scratch probably was there when you bought it. You just did not notice. And the dent in the bumper and the cigarette burns in the seats were those there too," he shrugged. "Look, I might have backed into a pole, but it is not that bad. And one of my friends might have dropped a cigarette, but who buys a truck with light-colored leather anyway? It is not practical." I took the truck to my regular mechanic that afternoon. The news was even worse than I thought. Beyond the cosmetic damage, there were issues with the transmission from the aggressive driving, and something had damaged the undercarriage. The total repair estimate came to $4,200. When I contacted my insurance company, they explained that because Jake was not listed as an authorized driver on my policy, and because I had voluntarily given him the keys, they would not cover the damages. I would be responsible for all repairs out of pocket. Further inspection of the truck revealed more disturbing details. The GPS tracker had been disabled during the night, suggesting Jake had intentionally tried to hide his movements. In the center console, I found residue of some white, powdery substance. When confronted, Jake initially denied knowledge, but eventually admitted his friends might have had a little coke in the truck. "It was just a tiny amount for personal use," he said defensively. "No big deal. Just do not tell Mom and Dad, okay?" I knew I had to address this with my parents involved. I invited Jake to their house and presented the damage evidence and repair costs. Their reaction stunned me. "You set Jake up," my mother accused. "You knew he had that DUI last year. You knew lending him your truck would get him in trouble." "I need him to pay for the damages," I explained. $4,000 is a lot of money." My father scoffed. "You make good money now. With that promotion. Just fix it yourself. Jake is trying to get his life together. He does not need this financial burden right now." "Financial burden?" I echoed in disbelief. "He destroyed my property after lying to borrow it. How is this my fault?" My mother's expression hardened. "You always were jealous of your brother. Ever since you were little, you resented the attention he got. This is not about jealousy. This is about responsibility." My father shook his head. "It is just a vehicle, Ray. Things can be replaced. Family is forever. You need to be the bigger person here." I left their house that day feeling completely alone. My own family had once again chosen Jake over me, even when he was clearly in the wrong. The pattern had never been more obvious and never more painful. The phone call that changed everything came at 2:17 in the morning, 3 days after Jake had returned my damaged truck. The voice on the other end belonged to a police officer. "Mr. Martinez, this is Officer Wilson from Seattle PD. I am calling about your Ford F-150. It has been involved in a serious accident." My mouth went dry. "My truck? That is impossible. It is parked outside my apartment. The vehicle is registered to you, sir. It hit a telephone pole on Highway 99. The driver identified himself as Jake Martinez, your brother. "Is he okay?" I asked automatically. "He has been taken to Northwest Hospital with minor injuries. I should inform you that the vehicle appears to be totaled." I threw on clothes and drove my roommate's car to the accident scene. The sight of my mangled truck wrapped around a telephone pole made my stomach drop. The entire front end was crushed. Glass and metal debris littered the road. A police officer at the scene filled me in on the details. Jake had run a red light at high speed. His blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit. Most concerning of all, the officer mentioned suspicious packages found in the truck. At the hospital, I found my parents already at Jake's bedside. He had a few cuts and bruises, but was otherwise fine. He was sedated, but stable, and would be released the next day. My parents were completely focused on him, barely acknowledging my arrival. "Thank goodness it was just your truck that got destroyed," my mother said, stroking Jake's hair. "We could have lost him. Insurance will take care of everything," my father assured me. As if that solved the problem. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was my insurance representative confirming my worst fears. Since Jake had been driving without permission, and while intoxicated, they were denying the claim completely. My $42,000 truck was now worth only scrap metal, and I would receive nothing. Before I could even process this information, a detective entered the room asking to speak with me privately. In the hallway, he explained that a significant amount of cocaine had been found hidden in the spare tire compartment of my truck. Jake was facing serious charges: DUI, destruction of property, and possession with intent to distribute. "I need to confirm ownership of the vehicle," he said, watching me carefully, "and whether you had knowledge of the narcotics." Before I could answer, my parents appeared in the hallway, having overheard the conversation. "Ray knew all about the drugs," my father said immediately. "He and Jake were in it together." I stared at him in shock. "What? That is absolutely not true," my mother joined in. "Jake only borrowed the truck because Ray asked him to make the delivery. Ray is the one with the construction contacts." The detective looked between us, clearly sensing the family tension. "Is that true, Mr. Martinez?" "No, absolutely not. I reported the truck stolen when Jake took it without permission." My parents looked at me with cold eyes. "Stop lying, Ray," my mother hissed. "Jake told us everything. How you offered him a cut of the profits if he would do the drop for you." In that moment, I realized the full extent of their betrayal. They would rather see me face criminal charges than have their golden child take responsibility for his actions. They were willing to throw me under the bus to protect Jake even when he was clearly guilty. The detective took notes on our conflicting stories. "We will need formal statements from everyone. I should warn you that making false statements to the police is a serious offense." I walked out of the hospital in a daze, my entire world crumbling around me. My life savings had been destroyed, and now my own family was trying to implicate me in a crime I had nothing to do with. As I drove home, memories flooded back of similar incidents throughout our lives. When we were kids, Jake had broken my science project the night before the fair. My parents had blamed me for leaving it where Jake could reach it. When Jake stole the money I had received for graduation, my parents had said he needed it more for college expenses. My first car, a used Honda I had saved for during high school, had been borrowed and crashed by Jake. My parents had made me pay the insurance deductible, saying it was my fault for lending it to him. Sitting in my apartment, I completely broke down. The pattern was clear, and it had been happening my entire life. Then my phone rang again. It was my mother. "Ray, you need to be the bigger person here," she said without preamble. "Jake has already been in trouble with the law. Another conviction would ruin his future. You need to tell the police the drugs were yours." That was the moment I knew something had to change. I could continue enabling Jake's behavior and suffering the consequences myself, or I could finally stand up for what was right. The next morning, I contacted Michael, a high school friend who had become a criminal defense attorney. Over coffee, I laid out the entire situation. "Your family is asking you to confess to a felony drug charge to protect your brother," he asked, shaking his head in disbelief. "That is not being the bigger person. That is being the fall guy." Michael explained my options and the consequences of making false statements to the police. Then he helped me develop a plan to protect myself. First, I gathered all evidence, showing I had not given Jake permission to take my truck that night. I had text messages clearly stating he needed to return the truck by 6 p.m. the previous day. Phone records showed I had reported the truck missing to my parents that night. 2 neighbors provided statements that they had seen me searching the parking lot for my truck, clearly distressed. I also had evidence from the beach incident. Someone had posted videos of Jake doing donuts in my truck, clearly intoxicated, and clearly not having just come from a job interview. Gas station security footage from later that night showed Jake meeting with people my attorney identified as known drug dealers in the area. With my evidence in hand, I went to the police station and gave a complete statement. I reported the truck as having been stolen after the 6 p.m. deadline, when Jake failed to return it as agreed. I provided all the documentation showing I had no knowledge of or involvement with any drug activity. 3 days later, Jake was arrested upon his release from the hospital. The charges included grand theft auto DUI, drug possession with intent to distribute, and providing false information to police officers. My parents called me immediately hysterical. "How could you do this to your own brother?" my father demanded. "Your flesh and blood, the same way you were willing to let me take the fall for his crimes," I replied calmly. "This has been happening our whole lives. You enable his behavior, and I pay the price." "Not anymore. You have destroyed this family," my mother sobbed. "We will never forgive you for this." "I am not the one who destroyed anything," I said, surprised at how steady my voice remained. "Jake made his choices. You made yours. Now, I am making mine." In the following days, extended family members began reaching out to me. To my surprise, many of them supported my decision. My Uncle Frank revealed he had cut ties with my parents years ago for similar treatment. "They did the same thing with your dad and me growing up," he told me. "Your dad was the golden child who could do no wrong. I was always expected to clean up his messes." It took me years of therapy to understand how toxic that dynamic was. With Jake's admission that he had taken the truck without permission and the evidence backing my statement, my insurance claim was approved. They agreed to pay the full replacement value for the totaled vehicle. But instead of buying another truck immediately, I made a different choice. I used the insurance money as capital to start my own small contracting business. I had always worked for others, but now I had the chance to build something for myself. Within months, the business was doing well enough that I hired 2 employees. I moved to a new apartment across town, creating physical and emotional distance from my old life. I also established clear boundaries with my parents. I would only speak with them on my terms, and I would end any conversation that became manipulative or blamed me for Jake's situation. It was difficult at first. They tried every guilt tactic they knew, but I remained firm, and eventually they began to understand I was serious. I made new friends through business networking events, people who respected and valued my knowledge and work ethic. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who saw me for who I really was, not as the responsible counterpart to someone else. I also started seeing a therapist to work through the lifetime of family dynamics that had shaped me. It was painful to confront how much I had allowed myself to be manipulated, how desperately I had sought approval that was never going to come on fair terms. 3 months after his arrest, Jake reached out to me from prison. His first letter was full of anger and blame, calling me a traitor to the family. I did not respond. A month later, another letter arrived. This one different in tone. He acknowledged he had a problem with both alcohol and drugs. He admitted to using my truck to transport cocaine multiple times without my knowledge. He even confessed that the job interview had been a complete fabrication. After much consideration, I decided to visit him. Our conversation was the first honest exchange we had ever had as adults. Jake admitted that our parents' constant protection had prevented him from ever facing consequences or learning from his mistakes. "They love me so much it destroyed me," he said, "and they hurt you in the process. I am sorry, Ray. I really am." Jake enrolled in an addiction treatment program available in the prison. He seemed genuinely committed to change. I made no promises about our future relationship, but I left the door open to the possibility of rebuilding some kind of connection based on honesty and respect. My parents made several attempts to re-establish their control over my life. They showed up at my apartment unannounced. They contacted my clients. They even tried to use other family members to manipulate me. Each time I enforced my boundaries calmly but firmly. Eventually, they began to recognize that the old patterns would no longer work with me. To their credit, they finally agreed to family counseling. In those sessions, they began to see their role in enabling Jake's behavior and how their treatment of me had been unfair. It was a slow process with many setbacks, but small changes began to emerge. They learned to ask before offering advice. They stopped comparing me to Jake. They began to show genuine interest in my business. A year after the accident, my business had grown enough to move into commercial contracts. I finally bought a new truck, this time a symbol of rebuilding rather than escaping. I chose a different model, different color, a fresh start. Jake was making progress in his recovery program. Upon learning that his sentence could be reduced with completion of education courses, he enrolled in business classes. We spoke every few weeks, our relationship cautiously healing. My parents continued their counseling, learning about the damage their enabling behavior had caused. Our relationship would never be what I had once hoped for, but it was evolving into something more honest and healthier for everyone. The journey taught me that sometimes standing up for yourself means facing difficult consequences and painful truths. Enabling bad behavior ultimately hurts everyone involved, even those you think you are protecting. True family support means holding each other accountable and encouraging growth, not covering up mistakes or shifting blame. As I drive my new truck to job sites now, windows down and radio playing, I feel a sense of peace I never had before. The resolution with my family is not perfect. There are still difficult moments and old patterns that try to reassert themselves. But I have found my voice and my boundaries. I have built a life where I am valued for who I am, not defined by my relationship to someone else. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt in the short term, but was necessary for your long-term well-being? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences. Share this with someone who might be struggling with toxic family dynamics and needs encouragement to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately heal us the most.